Everybody, and welcome to the very latest CADS podcast, where we're doing something a little bit different this evening. Recently, we spoke to Gareth Dace to discuss our previous chairman of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, and now it's time to jump into the present and one of the most debated topics among Tottenham Hotspur fans, the legacy of Daniel Levy. For over 2 decades, Daniel Levy has been at the helm, overseeing one of the most transformative eras in the club's history. From the building of a world-class stadium to the highs and lows on the pitch, his leadership has sparked passionate opinions across the fan base. But has Levy's stewardship been a success? Has he struck the right balance between business ambition and footballing glory? Or has his cautious approach held Spurs back from reaching their true potential? In this video, we're going to hear from both sides of the argument. Those who believe Levy has taken the club forward and those who feel it's time for a new direction. So sit back, relax, grab your Spurs scarf. It's cold out there, and let's tackle the big question. Is Daniel Levy the right man for Tottenham Hotspur? So I am joined tonight by two very special guests who have never been on a CADS podcast before, and they have kindly agreed to share their thoughts and be nice and smiley all the way through. So we're going to start with Harry. Hi Harry, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your position is in this debate?
Yeah, I'm a journalist for Goal.com, freelance mainly, but also do a little bit on Substack. People may have seen that on Bluesky. I'm pretty I'm Levy Out personally, but I got there across the last 2 years really. Previously, I had both feet pretty firmly in the Levy In camp. So I'm very sympathetic to kind of people who are pro Daniel Levy. I do
Mm-hmm.
understand it, I get it, but for me now, I think we've outgrown him as a. I think we've outgrown his capability as an owner, and I think we've outgrown his capability as a steward of the football club. Um, and I would put most of our on-field issues this season down to him. So it's becoming harder and harder for me to make a case for him staying in the role that he's in currently.
Okay, and on the other side of the debate is Johnny. How you doing, Johnny?
Hello, hello, how are we?
All good here. A little bit cool, a little bit chilly, but generally okay. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you currently stand? Just a quick, brief intro.
Yeah, yeah. I'm Johnny. I used to do some writing for various different Spurs websites back in the day, when I was young, when I was much younger, to be honest. I currently work in the civil service, so nothing particularly interesting. I my position on the Levy Out debate is that I'm pretty tepid um, on Levy's stewardship of the club just generally, but uh, I'm not in a active position to see him removed from his position as director of the club.
Okay, so for clarity, we are recording this on the evening of the 24th of January 2025. For those who are watching long way into the future, you may not be aware, but currently we're in fairly poor form. I think we've lost a fair number of games recently. We have just managed to win a game in the Europa League, which probably sees us going through to the next round, but there's still no guarantees. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to discuss long-term stuff, the stuff that we've been living with since Enoch and Daniel Levy took over the club about 2 decades ago, and what potentially could be happening in the future. So I did send you a whole list of things that we could be talking about tonight. And I know there's been a little bit of preparation going on, but
Yeah, of course.
as is always the way in these CADS podcasts, this is a conversation. We don't want it to be too overly structured. So the things that I think should be talked about are the financial health of the club and also our standing within the game, just as an opener. How does anybody who wants to attack that first?
Harry, take it away.
Our standing will get
Oh,
worse
Harry,
if we
he's
get
throwing
relegated.
you under there.
that's probably my big take right now. If we're a championship club next season, our standing will be worse than it is
Hmm.
now. Um, no, I think Levy's done a great job in terms of getting us to where we are, but I feel kind of like Levy has an overriding ambition. And when I say Levy, I kind of mean that as a catch-all for ENIC. I am aware that obviously Joe
Sure.
Lewis is the owner. It's just easier to say Levy, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But I think he's done a fantastic job in terms of transforming us into what he thinks is a super club, right? And our stadium is world class. We have incredible revenue making, an incredible revenue stream in terms of both concerts, the NFL, all of that. Like people may sniff at it, but it's great if it translates onto the pitch. And one of my main issues with Levy is that it doesn't seem to, and particularly now. Like we're in a month of not to get stuck onto current form, but we're in a month where the team really needs help, and all the briefings are saying the team really needs help, and there doesn't seem to be any help arriving. And I find that hard to square with the fact that there are maybe two or three clubs that earn more than we do in terms of global revenue, and two of those clubs are Real Madrid and Manchester United. So, if I mean the capability to go and be very powerful in the market is there. I don't think Levy really wants to do that, but I also feel like he's kind of taken us to a point and hit a brick wall, and I don't feel like we can go anywhere from here unless there is really serious investment in the football club. And I just don't know if ENIC are prepared to do that currently.
Yeah,
That's
I
where
mean,
I'm at financially.
yeah, okay. Yeah, I completely agree with the perspective that under the last 20 years of ENIC ownership, 20 plus years, we're covering a great amount of time here.
Yeah, sure.
We've gone from in the 90s being a fairly middling club, not that far on the verge of dropping out of the first division Premier League, um, and becoming a regular competitor in European football, having not just one of the largest stadiums in the UK and Europe, but also just one of the most attractive football stadiums, infrastructure, commercial revenue, status as well. Um, it can't be understated that our worldwide audience has changed dramatically from where it was in the 90s. If you look at the Deloitte Money League, it indicates that we're one of the top European clubs. If you look at if you look at TV revenue over the last 10 years, if you look at competition standing in the last 10 years, ignoring the dearth of trophies, which is not a small factor, but considering where we could have been, look at Leeds, look at QPR, look at Sheffield Wednesday, look at Blackburn Rovers. These are all teams that were notable, comfortable. I say comfortable, but they were at our status in the 90s, right? And they dipped out entirely in that time. If you look at where we are now in 2025, I can say I am grateful that we are where we are. It's a far more stable, far more comfortable position than compared to other people at our level, relative to our level from decades past. So I am grateful for that because the turmoil that some clubs have experienced in that time is utterly unenviable. I have friends that are Charlton fans. I have friends that are West Ham fans, believe it or not. And I don't know any QPR fans, but Millwall fans as well. That they would they would kill for some of the names that we've had play for Tottenham over the Levy years, some of the matches that we've got to see play, both at our home grounds and away from home. I think about Amsterdam. I think about even the ties that we lost against Juventus, even getting pummeled by Bayern Munich. The fact that we had a chance to show ourselves in 2019, and have our big old stadium under the lights against the best of the European talent. Some clubs would die to get a taste of that. And I am grateful for that. So largely my position is you have to look at the growth over this time and say generally, yeah, this is a period of growth. If you're talking about it as an investment, this investment has profited to no end, and it continues to be a level of investment both off the pitch and on the pitch that is that equates to this gradually rising trajectory.
Okay, so I think I pitched a fairly soft ball right at the start there because it's fairly easy to look at Tottenham and say that financially things have gone well under Daniel Levy's time. Um, I would say to mitigate that is the money available in English football since they took over, since Enoch and Daniel Levy took over, has been fairly huge, and it's been easy as long as you are sensible and manage things properly to actually accrue some decent money and set up a good base. That's not to say that everyone has done it, and I think those of us, we've all been watching football a little time now. I've no idea what your ages are, guys, but I would say probably a decade or more at least under your belts, and we've all seen clubs fail because they've not been able to do the basics and manage their finances properly. Is that fair enough?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, completely. It's completely fair enough. I use Leeds as an example of a
Mm.
club that wanted to shoot for the stars. I think their owner said we lived the dream when they talked about getting into the
I did
Champions
say
League,
that.
and it lasted all of about a couple of seasons, didn't it? And
Yeah.
I think Leeds fans dream of a time when they were just regularly in the top flight, regularly competing with the best and not dogging it out in the championship, which they seem to have been doing for the past 20 years, barring a couple of seasons.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
I
to Manor
think I
Solomon,
think
it looks like they'll probably be back next season. So let's move on to the next one. The next one is probably a slightly more difficult discussion, or certainly probably leaning towards Harry's point of view. For me, one of the things that has not worked well in the Levy era is the transparency and the communication between the fans and the people who are running the club. We've seen many areas where things have been bungled, I feel. Things that should have been picked up by the PR people were absolutely allowed to go through and became a bit of a headache and a nightmare for the club. So, Johnny, would you like to address that first, and then we will leave Harry to bury us all, because I think that is going to be a big thing tonight.
Sure, sure. I mean, I'm not Enoch's. I'm not being paid by Enoch. Just full disclosure, I'm not being asked to do his PR right now. The Super League debacle was a travesty. It threw our weight in with some of the most cynical, um, just exploitative end of football, and it risked, and it still does risk the threat generally risks destroying the foundations of English football, European football, really. And ultimately, football is about its traditions and its weird little quirks and kind of just like the status of the pyramid itself. So the fact that Spurs were willing to throw their lot on with people willing to get a big torch and blow it up is a travesty, and I will always remember that about Levy, that he would, if given the opportunity, um, throw his weight in with those guys. So that's a travesty. In terms of the general communication with fans, I want to like highlight that over the 20-year period, we have seen ticket prices rise exponentially over this time, and if it weren't for inheriting my dad's season ticket, I would not get a look in in terms of being able to get a regular attendance at football matches. And I'm not the only young person that experiences that. Generally, the alienation between football clubs and especially its younger fans that aren't on the ladder of regularly attending matches, maybe don't have a place in London, maybe just doesn't have the finances to spend 50, 60, 70 quid a weekend to go to football matches. I don't know whether or not it relates to transparency, but in terms of a general connection uh, between generations at the club and the club itself, it's ENIC has done nothing to mend that rift and doesn't seem particularly bothered about doing that. I would say, if to caveat that point, this is a general trajectory of English football. I mean, specifically English football. You don't see this on the continent so much. You don't even see it in America so much. A lot of sports recognize that the sport is kind of nothing without its spectators, without the sort of atmosphere around it. Otherwise, it is just a bunch of blokes playing football on a pitch, and you kind of need that level of connection there for any of a romance to exist. But constantly, I feel like English fans are being tested in their ability to maintain this love for the game at the elite level, and yeah, so it's not symptomatic purely of ENIC. Um, you can you only have to look at what other clubs say about their owners, and for the most part you'll see the same discussions, looking at the Taylor report onwards, looking at how the Premier League has changed football itself. So in ENIC's moderate defense, I would say that this is a general trend of English football in terms of uh, clubs becoming increasingly insular private entities that are very comfortable operating in capitalistic exploitative models, and not something unique to Daniel Levy himself. So when people put the dollar signs, profit over glory, etc., over Daniel Levy, I have to say that is football business, that is capitalism, that is English football over the last 30 years. Daniel Levy did not invent this. So that's my caveat to all this. But yeah, generally quite a travesty, which I mourn for, really, in many ways, because I feel like my generation's been kind of robbed of its ability to connect to its football club at the level it should do.
Okay,
Completely
Harry,
agree.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Johnny's absolutely kind of nailed it, really, with the connection between particularly young supporters. I've never had a season ticket in my family, and so we kind of have to wait for the FA Cup third round draw every season and hope that it's a Championship side at home. Um, yeah, it's a real shame, and I think the Super League for me was a real kind of eye-opening moment and quite a transparent attempt by ENIC to, well, get themselves a seat at the top table without earning it for a start. Like, it is kind of a joke, I know, and it became a meme that Tottenham were in the Super League, and those memes were justified. If I'm being completely honest about it, you're expecting to come up against the best teams, and Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and then they won the League Cup in 2008. Okay, cool, yeah, we'll play them. It seemed a bit like we were very clearly trying to siphon off some of that, prestige and power from other clubs that have earned it through being successful, and we were just kind of walking alongside them, like Ralph Wiggum alongside Nelson Muntz in The Simpsons. It really
Yeah,
didn't come across well at all, did it?
I like the ambition. I like the ambition of it to say, "Oh yeah, we're alongside Barcelona and Real Madrid and Inter Milan
Yeah.
and PSG and whatever." Like, yeah, I mean, I like the idea of being along those guys. I don't want Spurs to belittle themselves constantly and say, "Oh yeah, we're nothing." We are a historic European club.
We are. We
We're a
are.
historic
Yeah.
English club as well. Like, just because of the dearth of success over the last 25 years, it doesn't discount our general status in international football. But I do take your point that compared to Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Manchester United and Chelsea, it is kind of quite funny in many
It
ways to
is.
look at where we
Yeah,
were doing
it's a little bit standstill and they won't notice. And that kind of is how it came across. And I think as well, to go back to ticket prices, because it does always come back to ticket prices, really. The fact that we have the most expensive season ticket in the league is a disgrace. There's no two ways about that. I think, especially to look at this season, fans who have paid potentially £1,400 to go and watch Tottenham get beat every week. That's quite remarkable, really. And I know that obviously Manchester City can afford to have quite cheap ticket prices. I think their cheapest season ticket is something like 500, 600 quid. It's quite cheap. But and there are jokes to be made about that. But the point is, Spurs could do that if they wanted to. It is a deliberate choice not to do that.
It is a choice. Yeah. Ticket revenue accounts for a fraction of the overall income of a club. If they wanted to, I've had discussions about ticket prices constantly, and we can get more into what we could do to what the club could reasonably do to reform ticket prices. I wonder if to some extent, because of the facilities we have and because of the status of the club that we want to project, and the sort of just also London inflation in general as well. Like Arsenal also have very, very high ticket prices. West Ham have very, very high ticket prices. London inflation is a thing. I don't like it, especially when football is its own audience, but it is a thing. So I don't know what you'd say about that, about why we seem to be sort of an exception in ticketing.
Yeah, I mean, I do accept the London thing, and I do accept that it kind of is a it's a trend within the market, isn't it? And they don't necessarily want to buck it, and why should they? Because they sell it out every week anyway, right? So for them, there is no real motivation to change it. And I think, it does very often on Twitter, if you have this debate, it does come back to, well, don't go then. And it's like, well,
no. You see, here's the thing: we're a captive audience, right? Like,
yeah,
we ain't got anywhere else to go.
Yeah, precisely. And so if you have got 5 people who take that decision, and then potentially I'm the person who sees it on the exchange, and I think, oh, I might actually get to go to a game, I'm there watching us throw away a 2-0 lead. Like, it's but I'm still there in the stands, and I'm still putting the money in the pocket. And I feel like ENIC generally has, and I don't blame Levy solely for this, and I think people that don't understand the mechanics of club ownership and how directorship works and how these decisions are made, and finance departments at football clubs rarely discussed, but vitally important. And it will be advice from them generally that's kind of setting the tickets and everything. But the amount of deals that we have, the NFL, the F1 tie-in, did you know that we did a tie-in with Squid Game recently? Things like this. You can afford at that point to say, okay, we can cap season tickets at 800 quid if you want to. It makes no difference.
No, they could. It's not a question of ability. It's a willpower.
Yeah, exactly.
And without any
desire to do
independent, without any independent structures, kind of like limiting the level of exploitation, these businesses have no incentive to do that. So saying like Levy should care about the fans more, should be more transparent. You might as well be asking Tesco to lower the price of milk. You might as well be asking BMW to lower the price of their cars. Where's the incentive?
I think there is an inherent emotional connection that exists within a football club, isn't there? And I think there is a belief among a fan base that if they speak loud enough and make their voices heard enough, that they will listen because, as we said earlier, fans are the lifeblood of the whole thing. So
exactly.
Whereas I think with obviously like Tesco and BMW and all of that, obviously they are businesses in the same sense, really, in the sense of, you know, earning money and being profit driven. But, you know, Tesco don't go to Sainsbury's away, do they? You
No, no,
know?
they don't. And that's kind of the it's kind of a sick thing about the whole, you know, private entity of football or football clubs, is because it's not it, there isn't free market competition between football clubs. You know, like an
Yeah,
Arsenal fan is not going to turn around and say, you know what, I prefer the facilities and the service that I get at Tottenham Hotspur, so I'm going to go there instead this week and wear their clothes. If that's where if that's what uh, is wanted out of football, which I'm really sure it isn't. All of the narrative around football is geared completely against that, and yet the finances is suggested of this sort of private entity model. There is no free market in football, and I don't think independent regulators, if there are such a thing, should treat it as such. Because
I agree.
otherwise we're just kind of stuck with um, this exploitative financial model, which means that, yeah, they can raise prices every single year, regardless of whether or not people's wages are going up, regardless of demographics of fans shifting, because they know we'll pay it.
Yeah,
It's as
and I think
simple as that.
the key word that you said there is exploitation, because that's what it
Yeah,
is. You
yeah,
know, if you look at the, you know, they've halted the senior concession from 25 26, which I think got far too little press really, and seems to be a weirdly divisive thing on Twitter. I found that really bizarre. They also announced a 6% increase on season ticket prices. So from next season, the most expensive season ticket at Tottenham is £2,367. So,
I envy the person who's able to pay that. I really
well,
do. I mean,
quite.
they're the exception, of course, but the fact that such a thing as a ticket that price exists is ghastly. It really is
It
ghastly.
is. It really is. And I think that the Arsenal point is interesting because they do charge a very similar amount. And obviously, they built the stadium in a very similar way. And they had those fallow years in kind of a similar way as well.
Mhm.
But I think that their fans are more willing to go with it because they're successful, right? Because they're seeing it.
Yeah, yes, but there's a yes, but um I was there over the last 10 years, you know, like I'm not one of those
Yeah,
that have
sure.
completely forgotten what the Kroenke debate was at Arsenal for many, many years. They too kind of financially kneecapped themselves with the building of their stadium. Uh,
Yeah.
a lot of the discourse that was around the Emirates was this is a empty vessel of a stadium, of a project, of a club. What is quite negative about, but the reality is they kind of became a bit of a waning giant. You know, what
I
we're
mean,
seeing Manchester
yeah, I think
United
that's
now.
fair. I think that's fair, but I also think that, you know, there is a very kind of real version of seeing it on the pitch. You know, like when you've got a midfielder who's coming into the football club for £100 million in Declan Rice, and you've got,
Yeah.
you know, big money being spent on issues that they've identified and that they're trying to fix, and then as a result they've backed a manager to a title tilt, which,
Mm.
if we're honest, they absolutely bottled and should have won.
Oh yeah,
I,
yeah.
I feel
Of course,
I feel
they
like
should have won it, and they did bottle it. Yeah.
with Spurs, where is it going? That's kind of my big question with Levy and these prices. Where, because with Arsenal, they could make the argument that, look, yeah, all right, we've played you dry, but you've got 100 million midfielders, so that's fine. With Spurs, we haven't got that argument. That argument doesn't exist, and I'm wondering where that money is being funneled into. Is it to build this hotel next to the stadium in time for the Euros? Is that where it's going, or is it somewhere else? Because I don't see it on the pitch at the moment, and I think especially in a month where we need help, and you would think that those cash reserves exist, and this is the time to draw on them. We're not doing it, and it
Mm.
really
We're
confuses
kind
me.
of Yeah, we're kind of diverging a little bit from the connection with fans. I do
Sure, we are.
understand.
We are.
Yeah, I will
Yeah, we started out
continuing what you've
talking about
said.
transparency and communication and also PR
Yes.
errors. I think we've managed to overlook a few of them, Stratford being one of the main ones.
Oh God.
Also,
Oh,
you've
don't
got,
Wow.
remind me
Yeah.
of the Stratford
Wow.
thing.
yeah,
My
just the
Oh,
word.
way
that's
that
taking
was
me
handled
back.
was particularly poor. We've already
Yeah,
touched
it
on Super
was.
League. We've already touched on ticket pricing, but I mean, ticket pricing has been something that's been going on for probably a decade now or longer. I mean, prices were
Yeah.
going up
Yeah.
when it's still White Hart Lane. Um, and then there are other things as well. I mean, there's the illness that shall not be named, where everybody was on confinement, and there was some people who were not laid off, but they were put to one side to be paid by the government, and that went down very, very poorly.
Oh yeah.
And things like the sacking of Martin Jarl and the way that certain managers have been backed and others haven't been backed, and timings of players of being brought in and things like that. You know, there are some positives. I think there's a decent number of positives to the time with Daniel Levy, but looking back personally, I can remember some significant issues that just made me go, "Oh, that hurts," and it's kind of difficult
Yeah.
to justify.
Also, I
What
forgot
I
about the Dulux
go
paint
on,
dog.
Harry.
I remember the Dulux dog absolutely mugging us off. Do you remember that on Twitter? That was a PR
Was that the low
disaster.
point for you, Harry? Was that the low
We're
point, the
talking about
Dulux
PR
dog?
disasters. Yeah, it genuinely was. I remember my mum had planned to do some DIY and she bought some Dulux paint and she genuinely threw it out because she's a Spurs fan. Bless her heart.
I don't
Bless
know
her
how I
heart.
feel about that. I don't know if that's glorious or the pettiest level of football
I
loyalty. I
think
don't know.
both. I think both.
Probably both. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, there's one point I want to make about I talked about the London inflation just generally and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, you can't separate the sort of inflationary price rises in London football clubs from the general trajectory of inflationary prices in London. What was the area of Tottenham 50 years ago? Actually, the area of Tottenham itself has kind of remained the same, but London itself, especially business going, tourism, commerce London, is a completely different entity to where it was even 30 years ago. Like it's not pie and mash and Cockney accents. It's not authentic North London in terms of its working class diversity across races. It is we've gone from only fools and horses to yuppies, and I think that that is reflected in the type of football asset that Tottenham wants to project. It doesn't want to project Millwall. It doesn't want to project QPR. It wants to project the same elite sporting quality that you would see um, in the US. In particular, I think that's definitely the model it's working off of US football. And
Definitely.
I don't know. I think a lot of the resentment it comes from that kind of despair over the inbuilt nostalgia in football that we all have, which is tapped into by the club itself, and where we are today, and the kind of alienation that causes. Uh, I guess I'm getting a little bit philosophical about it, but I don't think you can separate the actions of Levy from that entire context itself. So to blame it all entirely on Levy's ownership kind of negates the broader point, which can't be changed with any change of owner. I don't think it can, only on a superficial level, maybe.
Okay, so
I mean,
we've
it's
got a number of
yeah.
points we want to get through tonight in a reasonably
Yeah,
short
of
amount of
course.
time. We've only got about 20 minutes left. So I'm going to bundle
Yeah.
my next talking point together, which do quite go quite well together. So I'm looking long-term vision and strategy, and also transfer moves. Um, I think they mesh quite well. Johnny, how would you like to start us off on this one?
So, strategy in the transfer market, you mean?
No, our long-term vision as our long-term strategy as a club, and also our moves in the transfer market. So the way we've worked in the transfer market, the way we backed our managers, or not backed our managers as it may be, but also what we're trying to achieve as a club and how the two work together.
Sure. I can sort of handle this to some extent. There was a very clear shift in 2012 from my memory. It was from the sort of status of the sort of direction of the club in the 2000s, and just sort of like trying to get us in the top half, and what I'd call generally the modernizing Northumberland Park project, the new training ground, the type of coaches we hire, the way our off the pitch stuff just operates in general. And yeah, that started with sacking Redknapp and hiring Andre Villas-Boas. It started with the move to Hotspur Way. It started with the Northumberland Park project, which produced the new stadium and all the renovation around the White Hart Lane area. And the idea, as far as I'm aware, I don't know whether or not Levy said this explicitly or not, but it was to position Tottenham as an elite English football club in both footballing prowess and in infrastructure. If I'm going to have to evaluate whether or not we've achieved that, I think we've done the infrastructure part brilliantly, and the on the pitch stuff erratically, and perhaps less deliberately than probably we would want. What I mean to say is our kind of successes of the pitch has kind of happened by sort of good fortune, things coming together in ways that we didn't expect. And so I'd say the trajectory of the club is it was and continues to be a sensible one as a business project, as a sporting project. And if I can speak personally, like to be able to walk up, the Park Lane, and gradually you come into view and you see the stadium and you see the area itself compared to when I first started going to Spurs matches in the late 2000s. There's still like a magic and a glamour to it, which there is something special about that. It's not to everyone's taste, but it allows me to dream a little bit. And so yeah, I am grateful for that, for what ENIC has sort of been able to grow in that time.
Harry?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all true. Like I can't argue with any of that. I can't argue with the fact that we've come a really long way. I personally, I miss White Hart Lane. I'll admit that. I don't think I'm alone in that as a Spurs fan. But yeah, I mean the new stadium is incredible. It's world class. And it's potentially, to talk about businesses again, it's industry leading, really, which is exactly what Levy and ENIC want, and the training ground is the same. I watch those day in the life videos, day in the life of Dejan Kulusevski and Son, and oh my word, like it's incredible. The investment and the sheer amount of kind of care that's gone into that is amazing. But I feel like that track stops when you start looking at what we've done on the pitch. And I think as brilliant as it's been outside, the ambition of a fantastic football club, of an industry-leading football club, has to be to win. And Tottenham, I think they do have that ambition, but either Levy isn't qualified enough and isn't bold enough to get us over the line, or it's a case of Champions League is enough because we're at the top table and we look pretty elite because we have these Champions League nights, and winning the Carabao Cup would be nice, but it doesn't really matter. When I think that there's a fan base here that have been starved of actual, proper, tangible success. Yes, of course, reaching the Champions League final is great. Of course, having a title challenge for the Premier League is fantastic. I've got some incredible memories from those seasons. I wouldn't trade Amsterdam for anything. I genuinely wouldn't. However, I could, 2008 winning that Carabao Cup, that was amazing for me. It was formative growing up as a Spurs fan. So
Yeah, same.
I felt at that point, I was like, oh yeah, we'll keep doing this. And the fact of the matter is, 2008, it's a really long time ago, man. It's a really long time ago.
Yeah,
And
it
yeah,
is. It is. It is. It is.
ENIC have taken us a really, really, really long way. And I feel like we've kind of got up to the gates of this palace that we just need the key to get in. And we keep just bumping up against it and having to go round again. And it is so annoying to continually restart the cycle. Levy consistently under promises, over promises to managers and under delivers.
And under delivers, yes.
I think we've seen that repeatedly. I think for every manager you could name a transfer they didn't get, and they will all go, "That's the one that sunk me." And for Pochettino, talking about PR disasters, for Pochettino, the first football club to go a full summer window and a full January window without buying a single player. I mean,
yeah, it was criminal.
It's not.
It was. We could have done with a few more warm bodies through the door. That summer.
Same as it ever was.
Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about getting over the line a little bit and how that must feel. So over the last since 2013, since Manchester United won that season, it was that was the Van Persie season, wasn't it? If I'm correct, only four clubs have won the league. So Leicester was the exception. Liverpool won it in the COVID years. And then for the rest of the time, it has been Manchester City and Chelsea. We're not Manchester City and Chelsea. The Leicester season, I think we can all agree, was a miracle. And the Liverpool season was... that whole season, if you can call it a season, was a bit of an exception anyway, because of COVID, because of pandemic football. And not to take away their success, they get that they have their medals or whatever, but I can't equate that season with anything competitive really. So really what we have is two monolithic entities in Manchester City and Chelsea. That's reflected in their trophy haul over that time. Liverpool as well, now in this decade, as in the 2020s, have started winning things again. And Arsenal have FA Cups in the league, but that certainly didn't make them particularly happy when they were finishing below us every single year. They only use the FA Cups now to gloat, but trust me, they have their own inadequacies that they talk about. What I'm saying is that the idea of getting the keys to get into the palace, is it quite possible that winning the league or winning the Champions League it would be a once in a generation thing? And the fact that it hasn't happened in our generation is sad, but doesn't it speak to some level of entitlement to expect that, like that it was for a lack of willpower that we didn't get that, and not just because we got close than most clubs in English football would ever get in my lifetime. We had some exceptional players in that time, some exceptional matches in that time. And yes, we don't have the trophy itself, but like, I have lifelong memories of players like Kane now, of Ericsson, of Dele, of Gareth Bale, of truly elite players that you can see even now. We are so proud of these players. And that is still generational talent, even if we didn't get the generational trophy. And I don't think we could just hand wave that away and dismiss that as nothing. It won't count for nothing in 20 or 30 years' time when we look back at our younger years, and we'll be able to tell our kids and the younger generation, oh, I saw Gareth Bale play. And you say, oh, you know, there might be some little gobby guy that says, oh, yeah, but they didn't win anything. But I'll say they were exceptional players, and it was a joy to see them play. And that will remain true regardless of whether or not we win an FA Cup. You know, I hope we do because it would be a great day. But I had other great days as well in that time, and I don't think that can be dismissed, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So
I
since
mean,
Enoch came in, just very quickly, Harry, and then you can jump back in. So since
yeah,
Enoch
sure.
came in, only 6 clubs in the UK have, or in England, have won more than Tottenham Hotspur. It's the 2 Manchester clubs: Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, and Leicester. So talking 2 or more titles of some type. And I think Manchester City and Chelsea were petrol dollar boosted, shall we say,
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
ways that almost no other club could do. I mean, when Chelsea got their start, they were given a massive amount of money and a head start, which only Manchester City were able to overcome when they were given their riches. So, Harry, your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I do agree, and I don't. I take slight issue with the idea that we as a fan base are in any way entitled. I don't think we are. I think we're just really starving hungry for something tangible, and I think that's different. And I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility to ask an ownership who have stated that their ambition is to be a world leading club to win stuff. It's not. I would be more than happy with Tottenham finishing in the Champions League every single season as a guarantee. Like I genuinely would. That would be fine if we didn't win a major trophy, whatever. It's fine. But generally, I feel like the ENIC have set out their stall that they want Tottenham to be a much bigger club than we were, and they want us to be amongst the elite. The only way you can possibly make that jump is to win stuff. It's just
Yeah.
that's factual, right? So the fact is, at every point where we've gone close, particularly that season where we challenged Chelsea for the title, I feel like if you put Eden Hazard in our team, we win the league. Generally, that's how close it was. I feel like it was a talismanic presence that won Chelsea the league that season, but also it was their squad because once again Maurizio Pochettino did not have a strong bench. He was still bringing on players like Kevin Wimmer, Clinton and Jai. We were still buying players like George Kevin and Kudu, Fernando Llorente. Yeah, okay, he came in and became a cult hero, and thank you very much for the Etihad, Fernando. That was
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah,
But
of
but
course.
also is he the striker that you should be signing when you want to be winning stuff? And I feel like generally, and this is a pet theory that I've been working on for the past couple of months, but I honestly believe that one of the worst things to happen to Daniel Levy in terms of his strategy as a director at the football club was Maurizio Pochettino. Because Maurizio Pochettino made him believe that we could win stuff with 14 players. And we can't. But when you look back at that team, there was a phenomenal starting 11, maybe a handful of subs we trusted, and the rest of them were just kind of there. And that is the
Sure.
main reason that we didn't get over the line there. Now, Johnny, you're absolutely right? That invariably it's inevitably going to come down to the bounce of a ball. It's going to come down to the variance of 90 minutes. It's going to come down to is Musa Sissoko's arm in the air in the first minute of
Yeah,
the Champions League final. Levy can't control that. And
yeah,
I
that's
I
true.
totally understand and respect that. But I don't think at any point he has put together a squad of 20 to 23 players where you look at and you go, there's not a team in the league beating
I
that.
agree.
And
I agree. I agree with the squad building, and if we're going to go to
yeah,
transfer policy as the next topic, then yeah, it was a bit too late in the end with Pochettino and squad building.
yeah,
I think the idea was in 2019 when we signed Ndombele and we signed Lo Celso and we signed Sessegnon. I know that transfer window turned out actually to be terrible because of how those
yes,
players ended up, but that wasn't the intention, and that's certainly not how Tottenham fans saw it at the time. That's not how I saw it at the time. That's not the discussion that was around at the time. It was exciting at the time, but it was too late, and he tore up that direction when he decided to sack Pochettino and sign Mourinho.
And that's not to cut across you, but that's really interesting as a point because he made a mistake there, and I feel like this ties into your other point, Stuart, about looking at where we're going in the future, right? Because if what he did there is he made a classic England move of sacking one type of manager and hiring a completely different one, and the squad was completely unsuited to that. Now, whatever may happen this season and whatever may finish with wherever we finish, if Ange Postecoglou leaves this football club, we can't do that again. Like that can't happen again.
No.
We've set up a young team to play attacking football, and we have to commit to that.
And like attacking, risk-taking football, which is geared towards scoring as many goals as possible. If we get rid of Postecoglou, we have to find someone that still agrees to that philosophy.
100%.
That won't compromise on that philosophy, because otherwise it makes the entirety of the last couple of years pointless. It makes it pointless.
Exactly.
It's retreading old ground. It's going from Pochettino to Mourinho again. And it's having seen Daniel Levy go to these club meetings, which have been spread all over YouTube, and the whole thing was on the Tottenham channel, where he talks about having our DNA back. Our DNA does not lie anywhere near a Mauricio Pochettino team, and never has. Very quick. I think we're running out of time, guys. So
did you mean Mourinho then? I feel like you meant Mourinho when you said that.
Who did I say? I meant Mourinho. Absolutely
you said
meant Mourinho.
DNA was not Pochettino's football, and I was like,
sorry, no. The DNA was not Mourinho football. Oh dear me.
That's Chelsea. That's Chelsea football. That's Arsenal in the '90s football. That's Mourinho.
Yeah. See, I've got this thing where I try and get those Mourinho years out of my head, and the closest thing to it is the Pochettino era.
It was just
so it just gets it.
Stuart, it was just a year. It was a year and a couple of months, but it felt like a bloody
about
lifetime
18 months
because of COVID.
Yeah.
It felt like a decade had passed. We had that miserable egotist as our manager instead of Pochettino. It felt like my life had shifted in that time.
That bloody documentary as well.
That documentary did not help.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh God.
PR, gentlemen. PR.
It's all back to PR, isn't it? The thing is, I think it was so interesting, Stuart, when you came in then and you mentioned some of the PR disasters we've missed, because honestly, my brain had just blocked them out. I'm not going to lie.
Thankfully, it does do that. Like the worst experience of football does kind of vanish from your brain, doesn't it?
It does.
Thank God that's the case.
Yeah, we'll be forgetting this
the one thing
by September next year.
Yeah, the one thing I'm going to take away from tonight is you guys are actually really close in your thinking. There are so many similarities in what you're saying, but there's just very slightly different edges to it, and you've kind of diverged a little bit on a path. So I'm going to give everybody just a couple of minutes to state your case of what you think the Daniel Levy legacy will be and what you think should happen next. Okay, I will monologue for a couple of minutes to give you a chance to get your thoughts in order. I am now 46 years old. I've got 3 kids. I've been through the Alan Sugar years. I've been through the period where I thought, oh hell, there's a good chance this club, if it takes a wrong turn, may not be here in 20 or 30 years time. And now I look and I say, this club will be around for my children to enjoy or endure as they grow up as well. So for me, Daniel Levy will always have my thanks as a Tottenham Hotspur fan because of what he's managed to put in place and what he's managed to build at this club. At the same time, I do feel that a little bit more boldness could have taken us a lot further. And there will be an edge of regret that we didn't take those final steps and we didn't take that extra risk that could have got us over the line. But there's we're in a period where the petrodollar is king, and it's screwed us in a fairly royal manner. So for me, I will be thankful to Daniel Levy. There will be a tinge of regret, but I don't think he's going anywhere until someone comes in with an absolutely massive offer to take the club off his hands. At that point, he will walk away probably feeling very happy with his little lot. Johnny, what are your thoughts on that? Just to finish out tonight.
If I'm going to reflect, let's say in 20, 30 years' time, if I'm going to reflect on the Levy years and the ENIC years and what it meant to me, divorced from the business side of things and the actual like nuts and bolts of the direction of the club, it will always be the years I got to watch football with my dad. Those very formative years, the years in which I got to actually mature in my perspective of football, and I got to watch some brilliant players in that time. I got to watch Modric, Bale, Van der Vaart, Defoe, Kane. Oh my goodness, I could spend. I'm sure if I have kids, they're gonna get sick of me talking about Harry Kane because I truly think he was our generational talent number one. But I'll think about all of that and the great players and the opening of a stadium, and I'll think, yeah, like there was some really good times. And I'll think of near misses too, and I'll think of the general frustration around the club, and I'll think of the ridicule that we have to experience in the media and online, and I hope there will be a day where we can all say that we're so happy and we can we can stick two fingers up at every single pundit, every single fan that laughed at us. I'd love for that. And we all hope for that day. Um, and I am sorry for the very loud section of fans that are brought to sheer anger and misery over the direction of the club. I feel for them. I hope that I've expressed that today because yeah, it's horrible to put so much financial and emotional investment into this football club and to feel nothing. And I can understand wanting to tear it all up and having billions and billions of petrochemical dollars come in and support it, like Newcastle just had, like Chelsea had under Abramovich, like Manchester City had with the Abu Dhabi group. And all I can say is that that's not what I want in football as a general rule, and I wouldn't want it to happen to my football club, not really. And I think it's short-sighted to say that, oh yeah, because Mourinho came in under the Abramovich era and they won stuff that's what we want our football club to be. Because personally, I think everything bad in football can be seen at those clubs. So I'll take the good parts, and I hope for at least one day where we'll get to experience some true, unequivocal glory. And if that happens under Levy, if it happens under a different owner, I'm ambivalent towards that. I think it will happen one day, and hopefully I'll be around to experience it.
Fingers crossed. Harry, finish us off for the night, and then we will say goodbye.
Yeah, I think if there's one word to sum Daniel Levy up at Tottenham, I think it's nearly. Um, nearly the greatest achievement of well our entire history, potentially the history of an English football club. Us winning the Champions League in that season would have been utterly remarkable. And I'll always be thankful to him for where we are now. Like you said, we could have ceased to exist in the 90s. I wouldn't have had a football club to support growing up. And I'm very grateful to like Johnny said, some of the players that I've seen and some of the matches that I've witnessed. Being there at Wembley when we beat Real Madrid was otherworldly. That was incredible. I'll never forget that night. However, I feel like the time for him to leave was upon the opening of the new stadium. I feel like he should have allowed that to happen and tried to take a step back at that point. Um, I feel like the last 5 years since Pochettino, 6 years, Christ, since
Yeah.
Pochettino, I think he's got everything wrong. I don't think there's a single decision on the football side beyond potentially appointing Ange Postecoglou um, that he's got right. The PR, like we've said, has been a nightmare. And I think allowing our greatest ever player to go to Bayern Munich, being the owner that oversaw that, the chairman that oversaw that, I'm not going to forgive that personally. Um, I find that incredibly difficult to stomach. And I feel like Levy allowed that to happen by not matching the ambition of a player who was desperate to win stuff at Tottenham. And I don't feel like Daniel Levy is desperate to win stuff at Tottenham. I feel like he is desperate for Tottenham to be in the Champions League. I feel like he is desperate for Tottenham to be amongst the elite. And I feel like he's desperate to maybe get a couple of crumbs off the plates of maybe Real Madrid and Barcelona when they can. But beyond that, I don't think he's qualified to lead us into a new era, potentially as this revenue giant that we've become and this financial juggernaut in the transfer market. We're apparently scrambling around for strikers on loan. And I can't square those two things off with each other. And it's constantly been a case of why are we behaving like this as a club since we've opened the new stadium and since we've been free of those financial shackles. And I do understand that there have been immense challenges and COVID blew an absolute hole through so many clubs' finances. And Levy's management actually did probably help us get through that. But however, now I've kind of been radicalised through the Ange period because I've seen another manager set up to fail, and I've seen another manager who's potentially going to get the sack through no fault of his own. And yeah, okay, you can make arguments about team selection and whatever, but we're talking about the ownership here. And generally, I think in the summer I called it a 4 out of 10 window and got absolutely flamed for it online. But I think it'll be an 8 out of 10 window in 3 years' time when Bergvall and Gray are, captaining their respective national teams because they are that good. They probably could be doing that in that period of time. But for this season, awful, absolutely terrible. And we are now staring down the barrel of what could be a humiliating end to the season. If we lose to Leicester this weekend, we are bang in trouble. And I can't pin that on anyone but the board at this point. So it really is one of those kind of, the Man United fan holding up the thing like 3 years and it's still crap, Tara Fergie. 16 years without a trophy, Daniel. Still crap, Tara.
Okay. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. If anything changes in the Daniel Levy debate or the Daniel Levy tenure at Tottenham, then Harry, Johnny, I encourage you to come back and we can talk it through all over again. And we'll talk about the future and where we may be going under new management, if that ever happens. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And I look forward to speaking to you all again. The next CADS podcast will be on Monday night, after the day after the Leicester game, and we'll be back with the usual crew. Thank you everyone for joining us, and until next time, come on you Spurs.